The autumn wind cut through Medicine Bow like a blade, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and something else, something that would change everything. Beth Morrison stood at her boarding house window, watching a figure emerge from the dust cloud on the horizon. 28 years old, broad-shouldered, wearing a hat pulled low over eyes she'd know anywhere. Cole Brennan, the boy who used to sleep on her kitchen floor when his daddy came home drunk. The boy who ate at her table like family. The boy who left 7 years ago chasing cattle drives with her son, Jake. But this wasn't a boy walking toward her door. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she smoothed her dark dress, suddenly conscious of her 46 years. Through the glass, she watched him pause at her gate, his hand trembling on the latch. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. What news did he carry? And why did her body respond to his presence like she was still 20? If you're drawn to stories of forbidden desire and second chances, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Cole's boots echoed on her porch like thunder. 3 sharp knocks. Beth's reflection stared back from the mirror beside her door, silver threading through auburn hair, crow's feet around green eyes that had seen too much sorrow. But her figure. The years had been kind to her curves. Beth. His voice had deepened, roughened by trail dust and whiskey. She opened the door. Time stopped. The gangly boy was gone. In his place stood a man carved from leather and steel, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his blue eyes holding secrets that made her stomach flutter. His shirt stretched across a chest that had seen hard work, and when he removed his hat, sun-streaked hair fell across his forehead. Cole. She barely whispered his name. You're so different. His gaze traveled over her slowly, hungrily, before he caught himself. Ma'am, I need to talk to you about Dick. The world tilted. She stepped back, suddenly dizzy. Come in, please. Her boarding house was empty. The railroad work had dried up and guests were scarce. They were alone. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire as she led him to the kitchen where he had eaten countless meals as a boy. Coffee. Her voice shook. He shook his head. Beth, there's no easy way to say this. She gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. Is he hurt? He's dead. The words hit her like a physical blow. She gasped, doubling over as if someone had struck her in the stomach. Cole was beside her in an instant, his strong hands on her shoulders, steadying her. How? She whispered. Rustlers. Up in Montana Territory. There was a fight over some cattle. Jake. He tried to be a hero. Cole's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Beth. I'm so goddamn sorry. She collapsed against him and he caught her, pulling her against his chest. Through her grief, she felt the solid warmth of him, the rapid beating of his heart. His arms tightened around her, and she breathed in his scent, leather, sage, and something uniquely male. I should have stopped him, Cole whispered into her hair. Should have kept him safe. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. It's not your fault. Their faces were inches apart. She could see the pain in his eyes, the way his gaze flickered to her lips before he forced himself to look away. I brought his things, he said roughly, stepping back. His watch. The letters you sent. She watched him retrieve a saddlebag from outside, his movements precise and controlled, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly as he set Jake's belongings on her kitchen table. For 3 days, Beth barely left Jake's room. She sat on his narrow bed, surrounded by the remnants of his boyhood. Wooden toy soldiers, a slingshot he'd carved himself, books with dog-eared pages. The room still smelled like him, like leather and soap and that particular scent that had been uniquely his son's. Cole moved through her house like a ghost, bringing her tea she didn't drink, meals she couldn't eat. He didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He just existed nearby, solid and present when the waves of grief threatened to pull her under. On the second day, she found Jake's letters to her, every one she'd ever sent him, carefully saved in a wooden box under his bed. She laughed bitterly, clutching the letters to her chest. Safe. She'd raised him to be good, to be honorable, to stand up for what was right, and goodness had gotten him killed. "It's my fault," she whispered to the empty room. "I taught him to be a hero." Cole found her there, on her knees among the scattered pieces of Jake's life. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and guilt. That evening he made coffee, using Jake's favorite mug without thinking. When he realized what he'd done, he started to pour it out. "Don't," Beth said softly. "Let me." She took the mug, inhaling the rich scent, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt something besides devastating loss. She felt not healing exactly, but the possibility of it. Cole sat beside her at the kitchen table where the three of them had shared so many meals. They didn't talk. They just sat together in the gathering darkness, sharing grief and coffee and the strange comfort of not being alone. When she finally leaned against his shoulder, exhausted by sorrow, she felt something she hadn't expected. For just a moment, she felt alive. But was it wrong to seek comfort in the arms of the man who'd survived when her son hadn't? Cole stayed. He fixed her broken fence, repaired the loose boards on her porch, chopped enough firewood to last the winter. She cooked for him like old times, but everything felt different now. Charged. She'd catch him watching her as she moved around the kitchen, his eyes following the sway of her hips, the way her dress clung to her waist. When she reached for dishes on high shelves, he'd appear behind her, his body so close she could feel his heat, his breath on her neck as he handed her what she needed. "Remember when Jake dared you to steal Mrs. Patterson's apple pie?" she said one evening, trying to break the tension. Cole smiled, the first real smile she'd seen since his return. "And you made me return it and apologize. You were so angry. Stomped around this kitchen for an hour." "I wasn't angry about the pie," he said quietly. "I was angry because Jake got to call you Ma, and I didn't." The admission hung between them like smoke. "Cole, I know it's wrong," he continued, his voice rough. "I know I should see you as Jake's mother, as the woman who raised me half the time. But Beth..." He turned to face her fully. I never did." She should have been shocked, should have been horrified. Instead, heat pooled low in her belly and she felt her nipples tighten against the thin fabric of her chemise beneath her dress. "You were a child," she whispered. "I stopped being a child the day I turned 16 and saw you in that yellow dress at the church social. The day I realized what I wanted wasn't motherly affection." The memory hit her like lightning. She remembered that day, remembered catching him staring at her with an intensity that had made her uncomfortable. She'd told herself it was just adolescent confusion. She'd been lying to herself. "Cole, we can't." "I know we can't." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "But that doesn't change what I feel. What I've always felt." Her breath caught as his hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. She should step away, should slap him, should remind him that this was madness. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "I dream about you," he whispered. "Every night on the trail. I dream about your laugh, Your smile. The way you used to hum while you cooked. The way your dress would pull tight across your... He swallowed hard. Christ, Beth. I'm going to hell for the things I think about you. Cole. His name was a prayer on her lips. He leaned down, his forehead touching hers. Tell me to leave. Tell me to get on my horse and never come back. She opened her mouth to do exactly that, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was she'd noticed him too. Noticed the way he'd grown broader, taller. Noticed the way his voice had deepened, the way his eyes had started following her movements with predatory awareness. She told herself it was wrong, that he was like a son to her. But standing here now, with his masculine scent surrounding her and his strong hands on her face, she knew the truth. He'd never been her son, and she'd never been his mother. What line were they about to cross? And once they crossed it, could they ever go back? That night, she lay in bed listening to him move around downstairs. He'd insisted on sleeping on the kitchen floor like old times, but nothing about this was like old times. She could hear him pacing, hear the creak of floorboards under his restless feet. Around midnight, she heard the back door open and close. Unable to stop herself, she rose and went to her window. He stood in her small garden, shirtless in the moonlight, his muscles rippling as he worked an axe against an imaginary enemy. Sweat gleamed on his chest despite the cool autumn air, and she watched, transfixed, as he moved with lethal grace. This was no boy. This was a man in his prime, battle-tested and dangerous. And he wanted her. She pressed her hand to the glass, her reflection ghostly in the window. At 46, she was still beautiful. She knew that. Her breasts were full, her waist still narrow, her legs long and shapely. She'd been a widow for 8 years, and loneliness was a constant ache in her bones. As if sensing her watching, Cole looked up. Their eyes met across the garden, and even through the glass, she could see the hunger in his gaze. He set down the axe and walked toward the house with predatory intent. She should have moved away from the window, should have gone back to bed. Instead, she waited. The kitchen door opened and closed. Footsteps on the stairs, down the hallway, a soft knock on her door. Beth. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Come in. He entered slowly, his chest still gleaming with sweat, wearing only his trousers. In the moonlight, streaming through her window, he looked like something carved from marble and shadow. I can't sleep, he said simply. Neither can I. They stared at each other across the small room, the air thick with want and danger. This is madness, she whispered. Yes. He took a step toward her. It is. People will talk. Let them. Another step. You're young enough to be my... Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't say that. You know it's not true. She was wearing only her thin cotton nightgown, and she saw his eyes darken as they traveled over her body. Her nipples were hard peaks against the fabric, and she saw him swallow convulsively. I should send you away, she breathed. You should. He was close enough to touch now. But you won't. His hand came up to trace the neckline of her nightgown, and she gasped at the contact. Fire raced through her veins as his fingers skimmed the upper curve of her breast. Cole. I know, he whispered, leaning down to brush his lips against her ear. I know it's wrong. I know it's sinful. But Beth... His teeth grazed her earlobe, and she moaned softly. I've wanted you for so long. She turned her face up to his, their lips almost touching. Show me, she whispered. He groaned and captured her mouth with his, and it was like touching flame. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his hair as he kissed her with desperate hunger. His tongue swept into her mouth, claiming her, and she answered with equal passion. His hands roamed her body, cupping her breasts through the thin cotton, and she arched into his touch. She could feel the hard length of him pressing against her belly, could feel the tremor in his hands as he fought for control. "I want you," he breathed against her lips. "God help me. I want you so much. It's killing me." She was drowning in sensation, in want, in needs she'd buried for too long. Her hands traced the hard planes of his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart. "Then take me," she whispered. He lifted her in his arms, carrying her to the bed, and she felt beautiful and desired for the first time in years. He laid her down gently, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. But as he reached for the ties of her nightgown, a sound from outside made them both freeze. Horse hooves, multiple riders approaching fast. Who was coming, and what would they find when they arrived? Cole's body went rigid above her. In one fluid motion, he was off the bed and at the window, peering through the curtains. "Shit," he breathed. "It's Sheriff Morrison and 2 other men." Beth's blood turned to ice, not because of the sheriff, but because of who would be with him. Mrs. Patterson, no doubt, and probably Reverend Hayes. "Get dressed," Cole said sharply, already reaching for his shirt. "Now." She scrambled from the bed, her hands shaking as she grabbed her robe, but it was too late. Heavy boots stomped up her porch steps, and loud knocking echoed through the house. "Mrs. Morrison, open this door." Cole was pulling on his boots when she looked at him with panic in her eyes. "The window," she whispered. "You can—" "No." His jaw was set with determination. "I won't run from this." "Cole, please." "Elizabeth Morrison." Sheriff Morrison's voice boomed. "We know you're in there." She tied her robe tightly and walked downstairs, Cole close behind her. When she opened the door, she found Sheriff Morrison, Mrs. Patterson, and Reverend Hayes standing on her porch. Mrs. Patterson's face was twisted with righteous indignation. "Sheriff," Beth said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Ma'am." His eyes moved to Cole, taking in his disheveled state, his shirt hastily thrown on. "Mr. Brennan, Sheriff Morrison," Cole replied evenly. Mrs. Patterson couldn't contain herself any longer. "It's disgusting," she spat. "Absolutely disgusting. A woman your age, carrying on with a boy young enough to be your son." "He's not my son," Beth said quietly. "He might as well be. You raised him, fed him, and now—" Mrs. Patterson's face went red. "The whole town is talking about it, about how you've been entertaining him, in your house, alone." Reverend Hayes stepped forward, his expression stern but not unkind. "Elizabeth, I've known you since you were a child. This isn't like you. You don't know anything about me," she replied, lifting her chin. "I know you're a grieving mother making poor choices," he said. "This young man is taking advantage of your emotional state." Cole stepped forward, his body tense with barely controlled rage. "Nobody is taking advantage of anybody." "Boy," Sheriff Morrison warned, his hand moving to his gun belt, "you'd best watch your tone." "I'm not a boy," Cole said through gritted teeth, "and I won't stand here and let you insult her." "Insult her!" Mrs. Patterson shrieked. "She's insulting herself, insulting the memory of her poor dead son." That was Cole's breaking point. He lunged forward, and it took both Sheriff Morrison and Reverend Hayes to hold him back. "Don't you dare!" he snarled. "Don't you dare bring Jake into this." "Jake was my best friend, and he'd want his mother to be happy." "Happy?" Mrs. Patterson laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call this sin?" "I call it love," Cole said loudly, and the words rang out across the porch like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening. Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, I think it's best if you move along. Find somewhere else to stay." "No," Beth said suddenly, surprising everyone. "This is my house, my property, and Cole is my guest." "Elizabeth," Reverend Hayes said gently, "think about your reputation, your standing in the community." She looked at the three of them, people she'd known for years, people who were supposed to be her friends and neighbors, people who now looked at her like she was something dirty. Then she looked at Cole, standing there defending her honor, willing to fight for her. Her choice was made. "My reputation?" She laughed bitterly. "What reputation? I'm a 46-year-old widow in a dying town. I've been alone for 8 years, and I'll probably be alone for 8 more unless—" She reached for Cole's hand. "Unless I choose not to be." What price would she pay for choosing love over propriety? Word spread through Medicine Bow like wildfire. By the next morning, Beth's boarding house was empty. Her remaining guests had packed and left without a word. The bakery refused to sell her bread. The general store clerk pretended not to see her when she entered. But the worst was yet to come. That evening, Cole went to the Silver Dollar Saloon. He told Beth he needed supplies, but she knew the truth. He was going to fight. She was right. She heard the commotion from 3 blocks away, shouting, the sound of breaking glass, a woman's scream. By the time she reached the saloon, a crowd had gathered outside. Through the bat-wing doors, she could see Cole facing off against 3 men. His lip was split, his knuckles bloody, but his stance was steady and dangerous. "Come on, then," he was saying, circling them like a wolf. "Who else wants to call her a whore?" "Cole, stop!" she called out, but he didn't hear her over the crowd. One of the men, Tom Bradley from the railroad, rushed him. Cole sidestepped and caught him with an uppercut that sent him sprawling. The second man, Pete Wilson, grabbed a bottle and swung it at Cole's head. Cole ducked and drove his fist into Pete's ribs, doubling him over. "Had enough?" Cole panted, wiping blood from his mouth. The third man, Dave Murphy, was smart enough to stay back. "This ain't over, Brennan. You and that woman? It ain't natural." "Natural?" Cole laughed harshly. "You want to know what's natural? A woman like Beth being alone for 8 years because small-minded bastards like you can't stand to see someone happy. She's old enough to be your mother." "She's not my mother," Cole roared. "She's the woman I love, and if any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me." Sheriff Morrison pushed through the crowd. "That's enough. Everybody go home." But Dave Murphy wasn't finished. "You hear that, boys? He loves her. The whore and her lapdog playing house." Cole went very still. When he moved, it was with deadly precision. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Murphy by the throat, slamming him against the bar. "Say it again," Cole whispered, his voice deadly calm. "Say one more word about her, and I'll kill you where you stand." Murphy's face turned purple as Cole's grip tightened. "Can't breathe." "Cole," Sheriff Morrison drew his gun. "Let him go." For a moment, Beth thought Cole might actually kill the man. His muscles were coiled like a spring, murder in his eyes. But then he saw her standing in the doorway, and something in her expression made him release Murphy's throat. Murphy collapsed, gasping and coughing. "This town," Cole said, his voice carrying to every person in the saloon, "is full of hypocrites. You drink yourselves stupid every night, beat your wives, cheat on your taxes, and lie in church on Sundays. But a good woman finds a little happiness, and you want to crucify her for it." He stepped back, adjusting his shirt, his eyes sweeping the room. "Well, here's some news for you small-minded sons of bitches. I'm 28 years old. I'm not her son, her stepson, or her ward. I'm a man who loves a woman. And if that's too complicated for your tiny brains to understand, that's your problem, not ours. He turned and walked toward the door, toward Beth. The crowd parted to let him pass. "Where will you go?" someone called out. "No decent place will have you." Cole stopped and looked back. "Then I guess we'll have to find an indecent place." He took Beth's hand and led her out into the night. Behind them, the crowd erupted in angry murmurs, but Cole didn't look back. They'd burned their bridges. Now where could they possibly go? Back at the boarding house, they sat at her kitchen table in heavy silence. Cole's knuckles were swollen, his shirt torn. Beth cleaned his wounds with gentle hands, but her mind was racing. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I made it worse." "No." She dabbed antiseptic on his split lip, making him wince. "You defended my honor. No one has done that in a very long time." "What honor?" he said bitterly. "They've already decided what you are." She set down the cloth and looked at him. Really looked at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd thrown away his reputation for her. "Cole, you could leave. Go to California or Oregon. Start fresh. Find a nice young woman and... stop!" His hands covered hers. "Just stop. Do you think I care about any of that? You should. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you." "My life is with you." His eyes were fierce, determined. "If you'll have me." She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted to. But the practical side of her, the side that had survived 8 years of widowhood, spoke up. "How? How would we live? I can't sell the boarding house now. No one will buy it. We have no money, no prospects." "I have money," he said. "Saved up from the cattle drives. And I know people in California. Ranchers who'd hire me. Cole, marry me." The words hung in the air between them like a prayer. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, getting down on one knee beside her chair. "Come to California with me. We'll start a ranch. Have the life we both want." Tears blurred her vision. People will still talk, still judge. Let them. In California, we'll just be Cole and Beth Brennan, a married couple starting over. I'm too old to give you children. I don't care. I'm set in my ways. So am I. The age difference. Beth. He cupped her face in his hands. "Do you love me?" The question she'd been avoiding for days. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me. Yes. Then nothing else matters." She looked around her kitchen, the place where she'd raised Jake, where she'd grieved her husband, where she'd lived in quiet desperation for 8 long years. Then she looked at Cole, young, strong, full of life and hope. "When would we leave?" she asked. His smile was brilliant. "Tomorrow, before they decide to run us out of town on a rail." She laughed despite herself. "That fast? The train to Denver leaves at dawn. From there we can catch the California line. I'd have to pack everything, close the house. Bring what matters, leave the rest." He stood and pulled her into his arms. "We're starting over, remember?" She thought about it. Really thought about it. A new life. A new name. A man who loved her enough to fight for her. What did she have to lose that she hadn't already lost? "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dawn came cold and gray over Medicine Bow, Wyoming territory. Beth stood on the train platform with a single carpet bag and the man she'd chosen to love. Around them, a few early risers watched with disapproving stares, but she no longer cared. Cole had sold his horse to pay for their tickets. She'd left the boarding house keys with the sheriff and taken only what would fit in one bag: Jake's letters, her wedding ring from her first marriage, and a photograph of the three of them together when the boys were young. Everything else belonged to her old life. The train whistle echoed across the prairie as the California-bound locomotive pulled into the station, steam hissing from its great wheels. "Last chance to change your mind," Cole said softly, though his grip on her hand was firm. She looked back at Medicine Bow one final time, the town that had been her home, her prison, her place of judgment. Then she looked ahead, toward the train that would carry them to their new beginning. "I'm not changing my mind," she said firmly. "Not about you. Not about us." They climbed aboard together, finding seats by the window. As the train pulled away from the platform, Beth watched her old life disappear into the morning mist. Cole's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought about it as the endless prairie rolled past their window. About the life she was leaving behind, the scandal that would follow her name, the bridges she'd burned. Then she felt the warmth of Cole's hand in hers, saw the future in his eyes, and knew her answer. "No," she said simply. "No regrets." The train carried them west, toward California, toward their second chance at happiness. Behind them, Medicine Bow grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another dot on the endless horizon. Ahead lay uncertainty, adventure, and love. It was enough. If this story touched your heart, show some love with that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between society's approval and your own happiness? Where are you listening from tonight? Until next time, keep believing in second chances